Military missions are known to rack up giant bills. When the missions pan out, the cost is hardly noted. But imagine spending billions of dollars on a program that ends up being nothing. The interesting part is that most of these projects were permanently put on hold because they needed more funds than what was pumped in already. It's probably not surprising that most of these came from the US military, since, after all, they have the largest military budget. So, here are some of the most expensive military fails from around the world. Number 1. Next Generation Cruiser, $200 million. The CGX program was a US Navy research program to acquire a next-generation military cruiser. The Navy unveiled their plans for modernizing their surface combatants on the 1st of November 2001. The new cruiser focused on defense against stealthy cruise missiles and maneuvering ballistic warheads. The ship would also be able to target land attackers and could conduct shallow water operations. The CGX was planned to be fitted with the ability to detect, track, and attack stealth aircraft as well. Concerns regarding the ship's stability started coming up in 2007. There were issues about whether the ship would topple over at sea. Then, there were issues of whether it could actually hold the ballistic defense weapons. Around this time, there was also pressure to make the ships nuclear-powered. In 2010, the budget proposal for 2011 called for cancelling the entire CGX program. By the end of 2010, the project was cancelled and instead placed flight destroyers to carry out CGX's missions. The concept of this ship is now in use for a new type of combat cruiser. Number 2. Armed Reconnaissance Helicopter, $500 million. Started in July 2005, the US Army made a $210 million contract with Bell Helicopters for the next generation of armed helicopters. The initial contract was for 368 helicopters to be delivered from 2009 to 2013. The helicopter was planned to be lightweight, designed for urban combat. Accommodating 2 crew members, the helicopter was to be fitted with a surveillance and target acquisition system. The concept was put on display at the July 2005 Paris Air Show at Le Bourget. The ARH made its maiden flight on the 20th of July 2006. There was some delay in getting to this point. The initial flight proved to be a success. However, in February 2007, Prototype 4 in its first flight suffered a loss of engine failure and suffered damage beyond repair when it rolled over during landing. Although the test pilots were uninjured, the Army issued a stop order a month later. Responding to an appeal from Bell, the helicopter was back on development from May onwards. By 2008, the cost had increased over 70%, and the per-unit cost was $8.5 million more than anticipated. In October 2005, the contract was terminated after $6.2 billion for the program was refused. Number 3. Advanced SEAL Delivery System, $885 million. A joint operation of the United States Navy and the United States Special Operations Command. This project was aimed to build a stealth transportation system for the US Navy SEALs. The first studies on the ASDS began in 1983, and designs were developed in the late 80s. The aim was to build a vessel that could carry Navy SEALs on covert missions without being detected. The system used at the time was having limited range and limited underwater navigational capabilities. It also put the SEALs through freezing cold waits. As designed to pick up the pace, the project was sucking in more and more money. Added to that were the significant delays in design. When the first ASDS finally became operational in 2003, it was 6 years behind the schedule. Even then, it had 2 major issues. The propellers were far too noisy and its batteries depleted much faster than expected. The initial budget reserved for the project was just $70 million, but by 2007, the ASDS had used up $885 million. And despite that, the design still had some critical issues that made it unusable. In April 2006, the program was cancelled. The submarine was later damaged in a fire, and it was announced that it was not going to be repaired since it would cost 3 times more than the original contract. Number 4. Northrop Grumman E-10 MC-2A, $1.9 billion. Another abandoned aircraft project was the E-10, and it was planned to be the pinnacle of airborne early warning and control systems. The project began in 2003 with a $215 million contract for the development of the aircraft. The plan was to design an aircraft with an advanced ground surveillance radar, high processing capacity computers, and robust battle management communications capability. The information from all these various sources could be translated at the speed of light by the aircraft system to create a fully integrated real-time image of the ground of the battlefield. George Muelner, the general manager of Air Force Systems, said that E-10 lets commanders make accurate, knowledge-based decisions, and warfighters, in turn, act decisively, rapidly, and strategically. By January 2006, the project was facing major scalebacks and budget cuts. By 2007, severe pressure was on the project because of the extensive budget it required. Given the competing priorities at the time, the project was completely pushed out of the budget. In total, the project cost $1.9 billion before suspension. The E-10 prototype was kept in Washington, but was later sold to Bahrain in 2009, where it was converted into a VIP transport. Number 5. Airborne Laser, $5 billion. This program was initiated by the US Air Force in 1996 and was designed to track and destroy ballistic missiles in flight. This airborne weapons system was designed by remodeling a Boeing aircraft and was celebrated to be America's first lightsaber. The initial modifications were completed by 2002, and the aircraft saw its first flight on July 18, 2002. After a successful test flight, the aircraft was directed to its next phase. Over the span of 16 years, the Boeing underwent many modifications, racking up a bill of more than $5 billion. The project was almost shut down when in 2009, the Pentagon drew it back to being a research program and took a generous chunk off its funding. But the project pulled through and even managed to track and destroy a missile for the first time in February 2010. However, the Air Force chief stated that the system does not reflect something that is operationally valuable, and the Air Force stopped requesting more funds for the project. In December 2011, the project was cancelled and the Boeing made its final flight on February 14, 2012. After being moved to storage, the aircraft was dismantled and scrapped in 2014. Number 6. National Polar Orbiting Operational Environmental Satellite System, $5.8 billion. The US Air Force and National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration together tried to launch a satellite to monitor the Earth's weather, atmosphere, oceans, and lands. The satellites could also survey the near-space environment and were based on a prototype sensor by NASA. Discussions for the project began in 1993. The idea was to converge the US civil and military meteorological satellite programs to prevent any repetition of efforts and to cut down on costs. The project eventually incurred more costs than it ever hoped to cut down on, costing around $5.8 billion. On 3 distinct occasions, the project overwent its budget by 25%. The project was not only military objective-based, but the climate and weather information was also planned to be used for economic advancement and health and welfare. It even focused on the global ice cover and the Earth's energy budget. But the project got far too expensive to continue. In February 2010, the partnership was dissolved and the research broke into civilian and military satellites. A mere 2 years later, in January 2012, the US Air Force cancelled the program. Number 7. The Comanche Helicopter Plan, $7 billion. The Boeing Sikorsky RAH-66 Comanche was intended to be the ultimate stealth attack air helicopter for the US military. The Comanche could attack enemies and also digitally transmit battlefield updates to the commander in almost real time, select the best attack methods, and carry out a coordinated attack. Yes, this was stuff of the future. The plans for Comanche began way back in 1982 in the heat of the Cold War. By 1993, the first prototype was assembled, and on May 25, 1995, it was transferred to Florida for flight testing. On January 4, 1996, the prototype Comanche had its maiden flight. The second prototype was also built and tested soon afterwards. However, by the time the helicopter started to be a little bit more than just a myth, the Cold War was long over. None of the governments that came later in the years saw the need to order as many helicopters. Then came the many attempts at trying to speed up the project while continuing to make serious adjustments to the design. The Comanche was taking up a significant amount of military budget. After more than 20 years of trial and error, the project was finally cancelled on the 23rd of February 2004, but not before they'd spent $7 billion on the project. Number 8. The Future Combat Systems, $18.1 billion. The FCS program was one of the largest programs in the history of all military projects. Taken up by the US Army from 2003 to 2009, the project gobbled up $18.1 billion in less than 6 years. The plan was to design and deploy robotic tanks, which could be remotely manned and operate through a battlefield. The tanks were to be linked through a battlefield networking system, marking a new era in warfare. The US Army had such high hopes for the program and claimed this program to be their most ambitious and far-reaching modernization program yet. The Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, joined the US Army to develop the FCS. Within the first year itself, a $14.9 billion contract was made for the development and demonstration of this new futuristic project. Things were off to a good start, with the program achieving all the criteria of a major milestone by 2005. About one-third of the development phase of the project was completed by 2008, and technical field tests kicked off in the same year. Despite all this, the project was running behind on schedule. It still needed millions of more funding. So after several budget cuts, the project was eventually cancelled. And those were some of the most expensive military fails of all time. Do you think any of these fails could have been avoided? Let us know in the comments below, and make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.